Welcome to the second episode of What They Don't Tell You About Crypto. Today, together with Domantas Pelaitis, one of the smartest developers I ever worked with, we were going to dive into security principles of the blockchain, and we're going to figure out how we can improve Web3 security for users and enterprises. Domantas is leading Lossless Cash. Lossless Cash is a top-tier blockchain infrastructure company that provides a new layer of blockchain transaction security, protecting selected projects and their communities from malicious exploit and their associated financial losses. Domantas and his company is the reason why Saakuru Labs survived during the Harmony Bridge hack and why we managed to secure our community from jumping into this massive financial loss after Bridge got exploited. Today, we're going to talk about two hot topics. First one is wallet security and how wallets get hacked. The second topic is smart contract security and how enterprises should make sure that their smart contracts are secure and well protected. So, welcome Domantas. Hello Domantas.
Hi Marius, super happy to be here.
How are you doing? How is Lossless Cash? How is everything going?
It's good. It's busy, but also good. There's a lot of stuff going on nowadays in crypto. Again, I think the market is becoming more and more sort of active in a way, but it also means that the hackers are becoming more and more active, which means that we have more and more work with each day the market goes up.
It's getting crazy again, huh?
Yeah. But crazy is good in this market, isn't it?
Yeah. Everyone is waiting for crypto to get more mass adoption, more people to come in. And actually, as we will talk about it today, because a lot of newcomers are coming into crypto and they are trying to get their way. They are looking to how to access crypto. So first topic of the day, which we're going to touch, is how do wallets get hacked? So what do you use yourself? What do you use as a wallet?
Yeah, so I guess I'm not a regular crypto user, so I iterate through a lot of wallets, and I use a lot of I guess I started from the regular ones like MetaMask, and then really quickly I realized those are pretty bad in terms of security and in terms of UX. So I really enjoy the product that you guys built. Been using that on mobile for sure. That's my number one mobile go-to product. Yeah, but then on browser, I sort of tend to iterate through a lot of wallets, and I switch a wallet maybe every 2 to 3 weeks just to see what sort of new security features this or that wallet has, what sort of innovation in terms of user experience one or the other wallet has, or what sort of gaps in their security they have, so that we at Lossless could be aware of maybe new scams or something like that going on that is tied to a wallet or a cold storage device that recently happened to a ledger. They had this incident that we can sort of talk about a bit later.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you mentioned that as most of the users, because there's so much information online, a lot of people just recommend using MetaMask and some other fully decentralized wallets, because there is a concept right now in the market that if it's not your private key, it's not your wallet. So people are literally choosing between two options. Either they'll go to centralized exchanges and just use their wallet, but that basically limits them for accessing the real DeFi. So they're just literally using the layer on top of DeFi, which is has not many things to do with the blockchain. And there is another option is to use MetaMask or Trust Wallet or other decentralized wallets. And a lot of people are not aware that are new security concepts. For the beginning, I would like to talk a little bit about what are the most common attack vectors. How do people get actually hacked, so that our listeners can listen to it and look through, are they handling all the potential security, and are they taking all the necessary security measurements to ensure that their assets are safe and secure. So I have a couple of items on my list which I would like to discuss today and get your opinion, because personally, from all the personal talks we had, I know how much of an expert you are in the security, and your products really represents that. So first question is, what do you think about the concept of the MetaMask or Trust Wallet? They're those wallets require people to store their own seed phrases or private keys and make sure they secure them. Like it literally gives that necessity of people to become their own security experts. So what is your opinion on that? Maybe how are you using that kind of wallet right now?
Yeah. So I think in terms of crypto ideology, those are like really cool and sound like really nice in theory because you are your own bank, you know. That's what crypto is all about. So you have the private key that allows you to spend the money using that key. My opinion on this is controversial just because I think that's not scalable. It's just like in the 90s, people would have to sort of manage their own operating systems and do very hard things in order to access the internet. It's the same with crypto. If we want for the crypto to go mainstream, we have to solve these UX problems. And I think like these wallets like that don't solve it at all. Like managing your own private key is super risky. You are a constant target all the time because whoever gains access to that private key gains access to your money. And you know, it could be a little malware on your phone, it could be like some file you download on your Gmail, and that's it. It's a game over. All of your money is gone. So I think that's just too hard for the regular user to be aware of all the like security attack vectors when using these wallets. So in the end, I think, yeah, those are very good. I use them myself in some situations for some use cases. But then do I think that those like good for a regular average Joe? No, I don't think those are good. They don't have neither the good UX nor the good security for that user. It might have a good security for me because like I understand how it works and I know what to protect, but like the average user doesn't know that. So it's just too complex for him.
Even when you know about like protection, like there are so many use cases because of not the user. I will give you a simple example. Like in my personal opinion, you know, like a lot of people use password managers. And password manager is supposed to guarantee you that your assets and your credentials stay safe and they store encrypted. But what we see recently that even the password managers does not provide you a like ideal layer of security. So I know even like quite a lot of people who were storing their seed phrases or private keys in let's say systems like LastPass or 1Password. But what happens is then LastPass or these other system gets hacked. Those people goes absolutely crazy because you don't know if your assets. So right now, what do you need to do? Do you need to move your assets somewhere else? But where do you move? And it's a little bit of the complex thing. And also sometimes you just like miss the announcement or miss the email that something got hacked. So you are never sure. Other people has this tendency on writing stuff on paper. And this is interesting because this is one of the recommendations. Like while preparing for our talk today, I have been reading like a couple of Medium articles because I wanted to get what are the recommendations which are online for people to secure their like private keys and seed phrases. So what happens is the first Medium article you open about this topic, they recommend you to write your seed phrase on the paper. For me, it's like absolutely crazy idea. And I know some people who have been doing that, but imagine like losing that. And those people write it on the paper and then like store it on the bookshelf. But imagine like, you don't, if you have a hard cash and you would like take that cash and just store in your bookshelf, do you feel secure about your cash or no? Like right now, even, you know, if someone steals, if someone comes into your house and tries to steal something, you know, like we definitely will look. My parents' apartment when I was a kid was robbed. So like every single book was checked, etc. So like for me, this idea is absolutely crazy. And if it's a fire or if it's something else. So another idea is to take that piece of paper and take it to the bank. Like, but then again, you need to pay for this. Is, as I said before, this is not absolutely not scalable because if you want blockchain to be used by billions of people, we need to have an ideal UX. Internet was also not used while it didn't reach UX. Also, the internet access. So every one of us is browsing. And I think this, especially with the MetaMask extension, this is a very, very interesting topic because there are few attack vectors. I want to hear your opinion. First vector is phishing. And the second vector is allowance. And I think allowance is more broader. So let's talk about the phishing attacks. How do people get into them? What we should do to prevent, in your opinion, as a security expert?
Yeah. Phishing is a huge problem in crypto right now, I think. Just because like for example, I receive a lot of emails. I guess my personal email got on some scammers list and got maybe bought by some group of scammers, and they know that I'm into crypto, and I get a lot of emails that look very legit, and it's sort of hard to understand if it's a of course, I know that I'm not getting free money. Whoever is telling you that, hey, here's some airdrop that you can go here and claim, don't do that. There's no free money here, so just don't do that. So what I'm trying to tell is that even for me, sometimes these phishing emails, they look very, very like real, and I see that there are these people that are doing these phishing campaigns. They put a lot of effort into this. They target the users. Sometimes they even send me the protocols that maybe I'm invested or I hold their token. So that makes it even more convincing. There's also ways to sort of imitate the domain of the email, meaning that you could see on Gmail that this like email address is actually legit, or at least you would think that this is a legit email, even though there's like ways for hackers to sort of use it without having access to the actual domain. And there's are ways like the phishing happens. There's a lot of phishing going on Telegram, when there's these groups and you get added to the groups. Also, there's like to the groups, and you might think that those groups are official, but they are actually not. Like every time there's a new token launch, there's like a phishing campaign going on. So like crypto is full of phishing, and I think it's sort of a hard problem because there's like once you've been phished, or maybe once you just lived through a crypto cycle, you know how these things work, and you just sort of tend to ignore these, just like you would ignore like ads on a page. You just scroll past through them. But for the newbies that are also like thinking about getting some fast gains, a lot of people in crypto are trying to do that. So for them, it can be really damaging. And like my advice here is just to realize that there's no free money, like no free airdrops, no free tokens, no like discounted sales or something. Like sometimes there is that, but if it sounds too good to be true, most likely it is not true. So that's the advice here. But the problem itself is sort of hard to solve. But also there's projects that been trying to solve that, at least on a wallet level, because that's where the users are doing the interactions with the scammers, either sending them the tokens or giving those allowances or doing some other action that's going to expose their tokens, their balance. So at that point, there is some ways to prevent this, domain checking, address checking, all of those things can be checked, and there are projects working on it. The problem with it is that there is just a very hard problem to automate, like solve in an automated way. We've been thinking about a solution in Lossless too, but it's sort of just not very scalable, whatever solution you try to do, because there's always a way for the phisher to bypass it. So in the end, you have to rely on the user being aware of these attack vectors and just phishing campaigns.
I think I would like to a little bit simplify that for our audience, because there are, you mentioned quite a few of different phishing vectors. Like one of the vectors is like, hey, really, really simple is like, hey, just send Ether to this, wallet, which is like all this Namibia Prince kind of phishing attack, where it's like, look, send me some crypto, I will send you double tomorrow or whatever. But there are a little bit more sophisticated. I think quite a few people are not aware. So for me, what is really important to mention is that people should be aware that Google is not capable of filtering all of the ads. Actually, a lot of hacking campaigns, then hackers launches the fake Google Ads campaign. They're using Tor and VPNs and like fake prepaid cards, all these sort of things to protect their identity. And people just come in, right? Participate in this IDO or whatever, and like they just literally click on the first URL available, and they are not even aware that, because they believe that Google is like fully secure. A lot of people believe that everything what's happening on Google, on the Google search, it's legit, but actually not, because they are not. Hackers are getting always more, so they are always one step ahead of any possible AI check or human manual check. We are always one step ahead. So never trust Google search, never trust Google ads. Always look for a trusted sources and always double check the domain, especially if you are planning to spend money. And it also comes not only to crypto, but it also comes to like credit card information as well. Like double check where you add your details, double check with what you're interacting. And this is a tricky thing because the way injected wallet works, so it's either your extension on either your wallet. What it does, it basically takes a JavaScript snippet and embeds into the GS runtime. So the application you are using, it understands that in the window.ethereum object, there is this code, like some functions which application can call, and those functions will trigger some actions in the extension or the wallet you use. And the wallet or the extension you use doesn't check with what you interact. So here we come to the second thing, which is allowance. So how the wallet draining hacks. Maybe you can explain what is allowance to our listeners, and then we can go towards explaining how to prevent. And I know that actually the Lossless has one product which can help everyone to check their allowances.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to be sure here because in general, you have to understand that DeFi applications are based on these things called smart contracts. And in order for smart contracts to do some actions, for example, do a trade of the tokens, or do some yield generation or whatever, they have to have an access to your wallet to move those tokens out and then move some other tokens in. Like that's how a swap happens. Pretty simple, I think. But that approval that you give for that protocol or product or whatever is called like allowance. So you allow this project to move some tokens from your wallet. And in a happy case, you allow some protocol to do some trade. You do the trade, and that's it. You receive the new token and you swap the tokens.
Maybe you can give an example, like for example, Sushi Swap. You try to swap one ERC20 token to another one. What does happen?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
What is the flow?
So the flow is that before you can do the swap, you have to approve. So maybe I'm swapping like some lossless tokens for some ETH, and then what I have to do first, I have to approve the Sushi Swap protocol to be able to move the lossless tokens from my wallet so that it can perform the swap. So first I do the approval, second I do the swap. That's how all the dApps work. I guess a lot of people that are using DeFi already know that they sort of click through the approval without even thinking at some point, I think, when they're doing a lot of these trades or a lot of interactions on DeFi.
Yeah.
And that's another topic, but basically, yeah, it's two actions: approve and then some action that you want to do. But yeah, the problem comes when you think you are doing some legit action, but actually you are interacting with some malicious contract, because it means you are giving approval to move your funds to some malicious actor. And that's the problem here.
It's like Domantas is like Sushi Swap instead of Sushi Swap.
Yeah. And usually that's how it is.
Let me allow to swap all my USDC. And one thing, I don't recommend anyone swapping lossless cash to ETH. It's better to swap your ETH to lossless cash.
Yeah, I agree on that one. But you had a good point. Actually, that's how it is. It's usually just one letter changed in the domain, and you think you are doing a trade on Sushi Swap or like Uniswap, but actually maybe it's Uniswap that double S, and you get scammed. So it's rather simple when you understand it. But if you are rushing, or because maybe you're chasing some opportunity, or maybe like some trusted friend of yours send you this link, then it can be a problem. And that's the first case. You like give approval to move your funds to some malicious contract. The second case is when you have given approval to some legit project, but that project got hacked later on.
Gets exploited.
And now like the hacker is able to drain funds from your wallet using that project's smart contract. That also happens quite often, at least more often than I would like it to happen. And that's because people do not remove approvals after, interacting with some projects. So maybe I did this swap, and I then still have this approval, this allowance enabled, so that this project can still move some funds at some point. So that's a pretty bad practice, because just because of the reason I just mentioned, if that project gets hacked, it also means your wallet gets hacked. And it's a good practice to either approve only the amount that is needed for that operation, or continuously like remove approvals. And as you mentioned, we have a tool on our Aegis product which helps people manage this approval. You can just connect your wallet, see what sort of approvals you already have on chain. Maybe you'll find some like contracts you don't know about, and that's like a really big red flag, and you should totally disapprove those. But once again, it's pretty easy problem to solve when you think about it, but a lot of people don't know about it, and that's how they get wrecked.
Okay, so as I see, there is like several of security layers which people need to be aware about. So first of all, it's like what wallet you use and how do you overall manage it. Yes, so your private key, your seed phrases, your credential information, your 2FAs, because there are other wallets like more advanced users or the users who are holding like more like assets, more valuable assets, or just overall more assets. So that part is like, because your own computer can get hacked and your own phone can get hacked. Like, don't store your seed phrases on your media, because every time you connect a USB cable to your phone or to your computer, there is a chance that, like the place where you're connecting, even I've heard there were some hacks where the hacker somehow managed to install the cables, like charging cables, in the airports or like cafes, and people were like putting their phones to charge, and like they literally copied the whole phone. Like they managed to like replace something under the hood, under the plastics, of the stall, and people just lost, like their whole phone got copied. The second layer is when you interact. So how do you find sources? How do you find websites or decentralized applications, mobile applications? Where do you connect your wallet, and how do you interact? So first thing is always double check if you're planning to interact with the smart contracts. Always double check where you are connecting and what you're doing. First thing, you need to make sure that the allowance you're giving, because allowance, especially when you're dealing with token transactions, allowance is what allows anyone from outside who you are interacting to spend money from your wallet. I think a lot of people are actually not aware of this concept that like contract or other source can spend. So if you go, even those companies go through security audits, and we're going to talk about that later, it doesn't mean that, everything is perfect, because hackers get smarter. There are new attack vectors to all the smart contracts, etc. So make sure you interact, and you interact in the way that it's finite. You started action, you finished action, you make sure that your allowance and everything else is safe, and you also disconnect the wallet after it. So you're sure that there is no more connection with that website or smart contract or the digital platform you just interacted. Yeah, and I think the third layer is, I think, overall being aware of your environment. It's I like to say that best for security is like ignorance is bliss. If you just ignore emails, if there is really an important thing, people will call you, people will reach out to you. So just like I'm very good at this, actually. I'm like really good at ignoring stuff. Sometimes it backfires. But if there's like even slight chance that, this is just a random email from the random person, it's better to ignore that. Also, I want to tell a story. My last one of the companies I worked with, Olimpo, where I was a co-founder, our CEO also get hacked. And it happened through actually because information was leaked in another company we have dealt with. And that allowed hackers to create some of the content and create some of the specific environment, which absolutely broke that personal protection sense. Because if that person knows what we are talking about, I can interact with that. You know what I mean? So always be paranoid. I think that's the most important stuff, like to take care of your security. And it's not only to crypto, but also to everything else. What about, so we've raised this topic that private keys, if people need to take care of their private keys, most of the people either will write it on paper or store it in the password manager, or I don't know, what other ways do you know how people deal with their private keys? I think
Yeah, I
hardware
guess.
was a popular one.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of cold storage, meaning having like physical devices that are dedicated to, signing transactions. I think nowadays they don't cost a lot, but it's like investment in your like security long term. If you are in this space for long term, I think that investment is like really cheap. But even those like get hacked sometimes. There was an incident on like Ledger recently, which sort of made that if you have a Ledger and you connect it to an app, you also could have been hacked, and so it's not a bulletproof solution, what I'm trying to say. So I guess for a regular user, my go-to advice is just have some like custodian that you can trust, some wallet that manages your private key. Have some people take care of your security. Don't try to take care of the security yourself, because most likely you are not competent enough. Even I myself, like, I don't feel safe when I have a private key on my machine, meaning if I just use like a regular MetaMask account, I never would put a lot of money in that account just because it just doesn't feel for me. It doesn't feel safe for me. So I think if you are not even, if you are very new to this crypto topic, or even if you are advanced but don't have like programming knowledge and like security related knowledge, it's just worth trusting people that know how to take care of security and just trusting them with managing your private key. I guess that's my advice in how to manage your keys. But in general, I think it's a very like sort of natural thing. You trust people that like specialize on this, have like multiple years of experience on this to do their job right. You don't try to do that job yourself.
Okay, so what do you think about MPC or Shamir secret sharing concepts for our users? The logic of MPC or Shamir secret sharing is kind of similar. Basically, what you do, you take your private key, you split it into many pieces, encrypt it, distribute around. So your private key actually doesn't exist in any system, as long as there is no overall agreement that this private key should be recreated, which usually happens during the transaction signing. So is that secure enough? And I can explain to this, but basically we are using this in our Saakuru app, in the Saakuru wallet mechanism overall. And I personally believe in this. What's your, as a security expert, opinion on that? And can that be overall a future for getting mass adoption of security and crypto wallets overall?
Yeah. I think it's definitely like one of the like best ways to store like a key and do transactions through like a sharded key using like Shamir or an MPC. The thing is that just recently there weren't any good wallets or products that would do this to you. So like a lot of projects, including us, but like pretty much everyone in crypto space that has like run some sort of treasury or something like that, use like Gnosis Safe, which I think is great and has a very good track record and is very safe, which also is like a similar concept. It's like a multi-sig, meaning that you have to gather multiple people in order to do a transaction, which makes it even more decentralized. So it's perfect for managing treasuries. It's not so good if you are managing your own assets, because maybe you are just signing it from multiple devices, which is still good, but the safe doesn't have a good like user experience on this. So yes, I think secret sharding is a very, very good solution. I'm looking forward to like seeing products that implement it in a very nice and user friendly way. I know there's a few projects that are working on this that also are incorporating like social recovery and stuff like that in case, something bad happens to you, so that your family members could still get an access to your funds. Because that's another problem with managing your private key. Maybe the safest way is to memorize it, then you don't have to share it with no one. But what happens if you get hit by a bus, those funds are sort of lost when your family.
I have one really good friend who went for a like treatment camp, like silence treatment camp, and after like 2 weeks, I guess, of like total silence, he came back from that trip and he said, "Now I can remember my private key just looking to it." So it was super fun as well. But yeah, it's hard, and one day you can sit also down and it's like, I forgot that.
Yeah, and this happens all the time with other passwords. So it will definitely happen with your private key. So don't do this, people. Don't do this. But yeah,
the weirdest thing is when you go to the shop and you try to pay with it, like your debit or credit card, and it's like, what's my PIN? Oh my God, just 4 digits. I did it like a million times. And because you're remembering it as a pattern, not as a number, sometimes it's difficult. Yeah.
So yeah, I think secret sharing is very most likely the best solution. Just that I was always thinking that this is not for retail and not for like average user, and it's not the way to go for like the mass adoption. But I think actually, and I changed my opinion on this, with like proper UX, especially with things like account abstraction getting more and more popular, where we're gonna be logging into our wallets with our like fingerprints or iris scans or something like that, then I think these like secret sharing thing is gonna be pretty great, because you won't even know that you are using it. Just like when you are connecting to some website and you don't really know how the SSL certificates and HTTPS works, it just happens automatically behind the scenes and happens pretty fast. So I think, yeah, this is like the solution behind the scenes that is totally the best one. And if the market will show if it's the best one, I guess if it's the best one, it's going to be used by all the dApps and all the wallets at some point.
Yeah. And also, I think it also helps to solve another problem, which is multi-chain. So because private keys are different for like a lot of different chains, and overall interaction with a lot of different wallets are different. Right now, another problem people are facing, because there are so many different blockchains. There's like Solana, Sui, Bitcoin, and like they all have different RPCs and APIs, so you can interact. So you have to have like 5 different wallets, especially if you are like heavily into Web3. If you already start to move, the management of multi-chain assets on the various chains becomes a headache. And then you not only need to write one private key or memorize, then you need to memorize or manage tens, sometimes even I know people who are managing hundreds of private keys. There is a lot of concern in the market about what happens to private keys, let's say, or to the accounts. If the company who is administering Shamir secret sharing or MPC-based wallets, if the company bankrupts or something bad happens to the company. So what do you think about that? How can it be addressed? Why people should worry or why people should not worry? What people should check before like deciding what wallet they use or not?
Yeah, it's a very good topic. I have a story related to this, which is maybe not super related, but I want to talk about something that happened to I think the project is called Multi-Chain Bridge. Like, what happened to them is that their project owner, their CEO, like he got detained by the police, meaning that, and he had the private keys of the protocol. Then I think his sister tried to do something, but she also sort of got taken by the police. And then the rest of the team was trying to do, something, but they just couldn't, because they didn't have the access. They didn't have the private keys. So in the end, a lot of like the project just like stopped functioning, and a lot of money got stuck at project. And that's sort of the problem. What happens if a project controls a lot of money? but then they stopped operating because of, I know in this case it was some legal issues in China, I believe, but in some other case it could be like some other like issue. So I think in that case, what could work really well is having those social recovery features, or just having
Like DAO? Like DAO, for
yeah.
example, company or like crypto company has DAO where people gather and let's say, okay, something bad happened to CEO or whatever. Right now, all of us can collect and we can recover the keys, recover the access to the system basically, and we can restore the trust. So something like that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If we are talking about that example, it obviously was too centralized for, like, if there's just one point of failure and it's most likely gonna fail at some point, then it means, that fund's gonna get stuck. So yes, I think projects should think of mechanisms, what to do and what's the operations and processes in case, things go south, so yeah, but when we are talking about wallets, I think, okay, I'm trusting someone to manage my private key, but maybe that someone I know goes out of business. What happens then? I think there should also be some sort of mechanism to recover my funds, meaning that, and there's like some good designs on this actually that I like. So for example, one of those is maybe there's like two keys. One is managed by me, but not directly, but maybe through my iCloud or something like that, so that actually in the end security is taken care by Apple, not me. Then the second part of that key is managed by that company, and whenever I need to sign something, we just like combine these keys and do the transaction. But if the company goes out, maybe I have a third key that allows me to again combine these two and move the funds out. But maybe that third one is then stored even in another location that I don't touch often, just to make it more secure. So yeah, that's like a very simple scheme, but it like works in reality. And there's more complex and even more advanced schemes. But I think you should like use custody, but you should use it with care, meaning you should think about these mechanisms of what to do if things go south.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I think to wrap up, I would like to invite everyone who is listening to try Saakuru app if you haven't already. Saakuru app is a Shamir secret sharing based super advanced mobile wallet. What we do have a lot of protection mechanism installed by design. For example, when you browse on injected browser, so you open your wallet and you connect to the SushiSwap, if there is a malicious website known by at least several of systems, our wallet, our browser will not even allow you to touch that. Basically, it will prevent you to log in. I don't know, Domantas, if you knew about that we have this feature or no.
Yeah, I think I've missed that one. Sounds pretty good. That's the one that I'm gonna be testing next week.
Really cool. So yeah, so if you try it, please give us a feedback. We connect to several of big databases, which records malicious website and basically phishing websites overall. Another feature we do provide is before you send any transaction, we also validate the address. We also interconnect with a couple of big databases, malicious wallet addresses. Those wallet addresses are, if you are sending, let's say, to the totally new wallet, we will inform you that this wallet never had a single transaction or single interaction. So in case, because a lot of funds are actually lost, not only get lost not only because other people hacks you, but just people make a simple mistake. For example, like on Solana, there is a case sensitivity, and you can just, by copy pasting it wrong, you can change the case sensitivity, which means like uppercase or lowercase letter. One letter can basically mean that your funds are gone. The same with Ethereum. Either a contract is malicious or the address is non-existing, and it will tell you that you have interacted with it a couple of times, etc., etc. So we do try inside our wallet, we do try to kind of prevent all these small mistakes. And also we try to prevent and build as trusted layer as possible between your wallet and the apps you're interacting with. So yeah, so if you haven't tried, try it. And I think we are ready to move to another topic, which I'm super excited about, because here, like, we both are technical people. We both do quite a lot of coding, but I can't compete with you on like smart contract security, smart contract design. I've did quite a lot of it, but you are an absolute expert. So how do smart contract gets hacked? Can you just reverse engineer the smart contract hacking process? And what people, and this part is more for the developers. So if you are ever deploying, or you're a business owner who is planning to deploy smart contracts and you want to be aware of what is happening under the hood of the system you provide to your users, this might be really interesting for you, because we're going to talk about how do smart contracts get hacked, but we're going to try to kind of explain it as simple as possible from like a user perspective, so everyone can understand it. So Domantas, can you, if imagine you're a hacker, what are you doing to hack another smart contract?
Yeah. What do I do? So first, of course, I guess you start with analysis. Like, hacks don't happen overnight. Actually, like, people, I know there's a lot of like sort of mysticism around hacks, how they happen, but you have to understand that these people are looking at smart contracts that they are targeting day and night, working on it like a researcher would. I guess a very nice comparison is auditors. Auditors are looking at your code, looking for bugs and issues, and trying to do good and let you know about those. But the hackers, they do the reverse. They look at it and then they try to exploit it. So it starts with a lot of research from actually, I think a lot of these hacks are done by teams, not a single person. So that's another misconception that we have in the industry. Like, maybe a funny fact is that when you look at the transaction patterns, maybe around 40% of all the hacks done and all of the funds stolen are done by the Lazarus group from the North Korea. So you have to understand that some of these hacks are state-sponsored operations. People are doing research from like 9 to 5, most likely doing it as a regular job. And
North Korea, probably not from 9 to 5, I think.
yeah, maybe they have some longer working hours and maybe don't have such a good working conditions, I guess. But yeah, still, it's a lot of work to find these issues in smart contracts. But what happens next, once you find one, you start preparing for it. So like, preparation is a couple of steps. First, if you're going to do an exploit, you're going to do a transaction on blockchain, meaning that for that transaction, you're going to have to pay some gas cost. And for gas, you need the tokens to pay with. So on Ethereum, I need some ETH to pay for the transaction. That's, I think, pretty easy to understand. But in order for me to get this ETH, I can go a few routes. Like the regular people take one route. They just use a centralized exchange, like, I know, Binance or Coinbase, buy some ETH and move that to their wallet and then do the transaction. Hackers don't do this. The reason for that is very simple. If they would use a centralized exchange, those funds would be really easily traceable back to their identity, because on centralized exchanges they have to go through KYC and give away their personal identity, even though there are like ways they could avoid with some so-called mules that sort of a fake identity is bought on the darknet, and going through KYC that way. But still, majority of the hackers don't do that. It's just too risky for them. And also, there's a better way to do it. You can use laundered money, meaning that there's a way on Ethereum and so on other EVM-based chains to use these crypto mixers that mix your funds with other user funds in a way that makes it untraceable. So most of the hackers use this way to fund their wallets, and you cannot really identify where the funds came from, because you just see that it came from this Tornado Cash protocol or like Railgun protocol, and that's it. And there's a huge pile of money there, so it's impossible. Like, there's some techniques and some companies do tracing and they have like pretty good results, but like for a regular user, it's impossible to know that this like a transaction is like legit or not. So that's the first step. We call it funding at Lossless. So they have to do some funding before the attack. The next step is the attack itself.
Can you detect? So let's say I'm thinking about the way, basically, like, because the protocols are mostly known, yes. So
yeah.
can you already somehow protect or detect if like someone is trying to interact with your wallet, which was like from the wallets which were touched by those wallets? You know, like for example, you see that address who just acquired some ether from the mixer is deploying a smart contract, and that smart contract is interacting with your contract. So is it possible to detect and prevent that?
Yes, it's totally possible. It's actually what we do at Lossless with our Aegis tool. So you don't really need to write some scripts to track this yourself. Our tool Aegis basically does this by default. If you add an address, and that address could be your wallet or your product smart contract, it doesn't really matter. We start tracking if nobody is doing these actions that are related to your address. And in case this happens, we send an alert to you immediately on your preferred channel. So we could even send you an SMS that, hey, there's these actions matching a known like preparation steps for the attack, and you should be aware and check it out. Maybe you need to like pause your protocol or maybe move funds from your wallet just to prevent the attack. So this way, we are able to spot the incident before it even happens. So a lot of people don't understand this, but yes, it is possible. We know that the first step is funding. The other step, I haven't talked about it, but it's smart contract deployment. So in order to execute a more complex attack, you need a piece of software to do that, and that piece of software has to operate on blockchain too. So the hackers deploy another smart contract. We call it attacking smart contract, and they do the attack from that smart contract. So there's these two steps that you have to happen before the attack even takes place: the funding and smart contract deployment. We track all of these. We track these malicious like funding attempts. We track all the new smart contracts deployed. And then, we immediately send alerts to our users in case something like this is happening. And this way you can pretty easily detect the attack before it happens. And that's like the preparation phase. Then finally, the third step is the attack itself. So a lot of these attacks, they use like sometimes it's something new, but majority of those they use mostly two techniques. And the first one is called reentrancy. To explain it really simply, reentrancy is like looping through like some function, but without updating some other variables. So let's say your project does some sort of transfer of funds, but it does it before it updates balance, meaning that it sends funds and later on it updates the balance internally. So if it has some sort of reentrancy issue, then maybe it can do multiple transfers and update the balance only once. And that's how the attack happens regarding
And actually, there is a very easy way to prevent that. I think like in the Open Zeppelin standard, there's like non-reentrance library, which literally blocks everything else. Like it blocks the wallet address. So the way it happens is like if you are interacting with one function, basically it prevents it interacting once again while that function is not finished. I think I'm correct.
Yes, you are totally correct. Exactly. There's an easy way to prevent this just by adding this reentrancy guard that does not allow reentering that function again. But actually, you won't believe this, but actually what happened on Curve Protocol is that they also had a guard like this, but which was relying on the programming language itself. They were using Viper. It's another programming language to use smart contracts, and apparently the programming language itself had an issue, which made that reentrancy guard not to work properly. So the developers did the best thing they could. They were using this guard, but then the programming language failed like them. So it was kind of a crazy story. I think it's now, of course, fixed and patched, and people should be aware that in older versions of smart contracts, this still can happen. But yeah, crypto is.
I think something similar happened with the exchanges. When the Java, I think the Java language, like the Java machine, had some similar issue like 3 or 4 years ago. It was not reentrancy for something else, but basically it was also Java engine itself based issue, which happened to cause some of the like centralized exchanges of miscalculating, and like hackers exploited that. I think also this reentrance attack happened on Uniswap, if I'm correct, on 2020. So like even such big names in the industry like a Uniswap, like not always are aware of like all the potential attack vectors. And from my experience, even some security audits, why every Solidity developer, especially Solidity, like I have expertise only in that. I haven't written any smart contracts on any other languages, only Solidity. So what's the most important is like just try to review contract yourself as much as possible. Even actually very good tool is like ChatGPT, even for like a basic layer of security, like copy pasting your smart contract code actually, and just, hey, can you give me a security review? It gives you a pretty decent security review. So if you are a newbie, or you're just starting doing Solidity, just drop it in the ChatGPT. It will give you quite a good security insights, and you can fix and you can improve yourself. So the next time you will write a code, you will be aware. But overall, be paranoid about the security. And Solidity is very execution time sensitive language. So if something is being executed one thing before another, those things can really impact and can leave the gaps. So I think this is what you're referring at that. Like two, it's like reentrancy, but there can be other different attack vectors. So literally when you finish the contract, you like what I do is like I scan line by line, every line, and I'm trying to compile what is happening by every line. And of course, probably tests, but we're going to talk about tests a little bit later. So what is the second attack vector?
Yeah, so the second most popular attack vector is flash loans. So for people just to understand, flash loan is a loan. It's borrowing money, but you do it in a single transaction. So I borrow some funds, I do some actions, and I then repay my debt at the end of that transaction. It's all made possible due to smart contracts, because they can have multiple actions in one transaction. And how the flash loans were intended to use was to sort of maybe help arbitrage traders to sort of move the price a little by borrowing millions of dollars and making the market sort of more efficient. But how we found, flash loans being used in the attacks is that sometimes, once again, there's some issue with the math on your smart contract, and then it allows the project to by using large sums of money, I'm talking about tens of millions of dollars, to manipulate the price, or maybe get some rewards by adding and removing the liquidity in a single transaction, or maybe adding the, one of the easier examples is I add some, like the money I borrow, I add it to the liquidity of the project. It changes the price. Maybe then I buy some or sell some other token in a very favorable price, and then I remove that liquidity and repay my debt plus interest with the gains I gave from that very sort of nice trade that use like price that is totally unrealistic. So
Can it be
that's
used
why.
otherwise? Like, can it be used for like short, like sort of like shorting mechanism? Is, let's say, if you own like specific token, so you loan, then you dump your token, when you rebuy, give a loan back, and then use the same, like rebuy the
Yeah,
token, push the price back, something like that. Okay,
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, could totally be used like that. The biggest problem is when projects like calculate price based on sort of a very short time span. So like Uniswap and some other mature protocols, like they have these time weighted average price things where you don't really they never use price that is based on like just current transaction. Just because of this reason, that price can be really easily manipulated, and if you spread out through even a few blocks, then it's pretty much impossible to move it without having actual capital. But if your price calculations are based on a single transaction, then it can be changed really easily with flash loans, and people should be aware of that. And a lot of hacks happen just because of this reason. And there's of course more like fancy hacks involving flash loans, but then it's just case by case. Most of them are quite unique.
Okay, so let's say I'm developing decentralized application. I'm enterprise who is willing to do. So can you summarize in like 3 easy steps or like 5 easy steps what I need to do to make sure that my security is like on top? Put
Yeah,
it, and we talk about smart contracts.
Yeah. So my top advice for security-oriented and secure development of smart contracts would be first, just know if there are reentrancy issues, and if you can, just always use reentrancy guards. Even if you think that there's no possible way to reenter, like your function, still use those reentrancy guards. Then,
especially, can I add a little bit here? So especially right, there are so many blockchains which are cheap. Like I think like previously, the Ethereum transactions were so expensive and blockchains were not scalable. Everyone was like super saving on gas fees. But like right now, like, and most of the blockchains and transaction cost like pennies. And for example, on Saakuru blockchain, is like transactions are free. So it's like just adding that single thing, which helps to sleep tight, like to be calm, like that you at least will not have this major issue, which causes most of the security hacks. Just adding that one additional function can like save your company.
Exactly. It could have prevented a lot of money stolen for some projects. So yeah, then second, just make sure your math is sound, meaning that you know what you are doing, you know how you are calculating prices, you know that prices can be easily manipulated, and you are prepared for it. So in DeFi, everything is composable. So you are relying on a lot of third parties and their data, their prices, their like even like if you rely and you do transfers of some ERC20 tokens, that's still a smart contract. You still should be thinking that even that can have issues. Maybe they like one thing that actually happened to us is the some of the ERC20s they charge fees on every transfer. So maybe you are trying to transfer 1,000 tokens, but in the end you get like 900 because of the fees. You have to understand that these integrations like can have issues. So you should never trust them, but always verify it. So yeah, just make sure your math is sound, and you never are trusting anything. You are always verifying everything.
Okay. What do you think about upgradable smart contracts, and are they a potential security issue? Because you have the owner concept. For the listeners who are not aware, so upgradable smart contracts, there is a concept which allows you to upgrade smart contract business logic, but not upgrade the data. So you can upgrade the business logic by deploying another contract and assigning the new business logic through the proxy. And the proxy stores all the data, but the smart contract logic is being handled by another contract, which can be like easily replaced by the owner. So potential security risk here is that you lose the access, or hacker gains access to the owner wallet, and then they can by analyzing and by understanding your smart contract, they can either corrupt, or they can also they can pretty much block your access. First of all, then we can upgrade your contract and make it unsecure, unexploited, different way. So what do you think, like how should companies manage that? Because a lot of companies, then they need their smart contracts to be upgradable. You need to be able to change them, to change logic, and even if some security breach happens, you want to have this ability to upgrade, because you want to fix. You don't want to just like replace everything. So what can be done regarding that? And I think this is a little bit related to the topic we discussed before. But yeah, we want let's hear you.
Yeah, totally. So I think it's a tool that can backfire, but it's pretty much like a thing that DeFi wouldn't be able to do a lot of things if they wouldn't have this tool, just because smart contract by itself is immutable, meaning that a code you write, you cannot change it later on if you are not using these upgradable contracts pattern. Meaning that, yeah, if you have a bug, you cannot fix it. It's pretty unique to crypto, I think. Maybe it was unique to software when it was, being distributed to like CDs or something where you couldn't upgrade stuff. But now we are used to software that gets upgraded even daily, or monthly or weekly, or your iOS on your phone gets upgraded and gets security patches all the time. Websites get upgraded without even you knowing about it. So I think it's naturally software development world figured out that it's a good thing to upgrade stuff, just because it makes it more robust, it makes it more maintainable in the long term. You can just remove the tech debt that maybe you had at some point. So I am a proponent of these sort of patterns, but then it can backfire, as you mentioned. Like maybe like one of the worst things I saw when the upgradable smart contract was managed by a MetaMask account, and that MetaMask account got like hacked. The hacker, he changed the contract and drained all the funds from all the users. So that's kind of crazy. And these things can happen in case the developers of these upgradable smart contracts are not aware. But still, I think it's worth the risk in a lot of cases. I think it's worth the risk in a lot of cases. Just because in our own example at Lossless, we had a few iterations on our protocol where we improved things, where we added more logic, added like ways to improve things to do them in a smarter way. So I think without having those patterns, it would be pretty much impossible. And if you are a person that knows what you are doing, it's all totally okay to do it, I think.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. I think the most important thing is just for the developer to be paranoid, especially when you're upgrading or you're directly using the private keys. Are there any solutions in the market which can ease the developer experience when it comes to upgradable smart contracts? Because one way is just to use it. Let's say if you're using hard hat, so a lot of people are just using private keys directly, but I know that there are some of products and tools which can be used to prevent direct usage of the private key.
Yeah. So I think a very good tool for this is once again Open Zeppelin product called Defender. They have a pretty nice way to managing these upgradable smart contracts, where you could really add those contracts, add the admins of those contracts, do all the signing through their platform, do the upgrades, see who's upgrading what, see how many signatures you have to like have for the upgrade to happen. So I'm a fan of that tool, so that's what I would recommend. And I assume there are other like products like that. So still, my go-to is that one, just because they recently released even a better new version, which is even better. So yeah, and also Open Zeppelin team has done a lot of good for crypto. From creating a lot of these standards and these contract templates to doing a lot of great audits and a lot of security related work and research. And yeah, I think their team is pretty great. Another thing is that Defender tool I've just mentioned is sort of free to use. So that's another nice thing from them.
Yeah, I think everything they do is just open source. So yeah, pretty good. I want to talk also about public permission blockchains. In Saakuru, we have a public permission blockchains, which I believe is an absolutely great tool for enterprises who want to deploy their applications. What we provide a gasless mode and scalability and almost real-time block confirmation. But I think when it comes to like enterprise security, what is really important to mention that public permission blockchains also prevent a lot of hacks. How does it happen? Because anyone who wants to deploy smart contracts on Saakuru blockchains needs to be whitelisted first. You can deploy a smart contract. So if you're a hacker and if you manage to like somehow get into like some data about other smart contracts, get into the details, analyze those, to deploy the malicious smart contract, you will still need our approval. So we are getting additional layer of security, which is, I believe, and it's probably the best way for enterprises who are looking for the public solutions, public blockchains, but we don't have to mitigate all those risks which are provided with public permissionless blockchains, like, I don't know, any other public permissionless EVM. So what is your take on public permission blockchains, even though they're managed by the single entity, and there is still this, because the whole crypto was created from those like outlaws who shouted that like a single entity can't manage stuff. But in your opinion, is it good or is it bad for enterprises who build on or who want to build on Web3?
Yeah. So I think a lot of crypto maxis won't agree with me on this, but I actually think that they have their place and they are needed in the crypto space. And I think they can do a lot of good, especially for the companies that are looking for a very sort of explicit like security parameters and explicit sort of attack vectors and like even some standardization, because the crypto by itself is a wild west. You can do whatever you want. There's hacks happening almost every week, and you cannot really onboard big companies that have very strict requirements for the platforms they use into places like Binance Smart Chain, where like the majority of traffic is like some scam tokens. So obviously they are not going to use that chain, but they also might not want to use Ethereum because there's a lot of like money laundering happening there. And then your transactions are being processed together with like some people that are moving funds to North Korea. So obviously that doesn't sound good, and they're not going to do it. So I think there's place for chains like that. And I really like the security properties that you guys are working on and allowing. Because like the thing you mentioned, the whitelisting, it sounds like a simple thing, but most likely that like if something like Ethereum would have had it, it would have prevented like 95% of old hacks. Just a very simple like that thing like that is able to prevent a very, very big chunk of money being stolen. So I'm totally into it. I think they have their own place. They have their own use cases. I've been working on a few myself in the past. And I think the technology has also evolved because like previously it wasn't even that good. There were a lot of shilling from companies like IBM to use their chains where in the end they didn't have neither the good UX. They were easy for the developers to develop on or manage. And I think now things in recent few years have changed, and projects like yours is really bringing this to fruition. To sort of making it how it should be made and to be useful.
Yeah, I think this is what, because as you said, like a lot of like crypto heads, like the real believers in this anarchy and like full decentralization, They like always against any centralized entity management or at least approval system, something like that. But what it does, if you look to the crypto market right now, if I'm not correcting, Binance holds at least like 34% of like the whole market. So because they are the company which provides a good UX for trading, a good UX for doing quite a few other things. Like for example, fiat off ramp, like Binance had like for a very long time, we had the best solution for that. I think right now there are others who are better, but this embracing this anarchy causes the majority of the world to shift away from decentralization. And by not allowing this small trade-offs, which actually happened right now, because like proof of stake and like a lot of other models where crypto moved towards right now eventually proved to be safer, faster, more secure, even though we are a little bit more centralized or a little bit different design. So I think this is the other fact, that if you are a good company with a good faith, if you're enterprise with a good faith, and you want to build something useful for people, it can be game, it can be DeFi platform, it can be identity system, whatever you want to build. If you are already a publicly established entity with the owners, public permission whitelisting is the way to go. If that prevents like the scam and hacks and most of the other stuff, that's what we believe. And yeah, there is always a discussion and an argument on this sort of topic, but I think there are certain trade-offs which definitely are very, very helpful for just development of the whole Web3 and the development of the blockchain adaptability.
Yeah, look, a lot of people are criticizing these chains, saying that they are centralized, and like that's the biggest problem with them, because yeah, as you said, one entity controls everything. But actually, a lot of these side chains like Binance Smart Chain or like even Polygon, they also are managed by one company in the end. So for example, there was this big incident, I think a couple of years ago on Binance Smart Chain, and it was so big that they decided to stop the whole blockchain. And the blockchain was offline for like 12 hours, I think. Yeah. So yeah, they sort of sell you sort of like decentralization, but in the end, when there's a big amount of money involved, then yeah, they decide that, okay, we're gonna just turn it off. So they still have that button on their side. And a lot of like layer 2s are managed by a multi-sig, where maybe there's just only a few signers, meaning a few 10 members can still turn off the transactions, on that sign chain, or turn off the layer 2 bridging on some layer 2. So yeah, you have to understand that like real decentralization is very rare, and it's not useful in all the places.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, to finish this topic, because I would like to wrap up the smart contract series. I think we gave a quite a good overview of what people need to look for when they develop smart contracts. What are the like attack vectors? What are the prevention mechanisms? For the finish of this topic, I would like to talk about the Harmony Bridge hack and about how Lossless Cash saved AAG and the overall AAG community from a terrible incident, differently from a lot of other projects which were like very, very angry after it. So I remember 2 years ago, I think it's actually exactly 2 years ago, I think 2 years and like 2 months, something like that. And I started to code AAG token contract. I reached out to you because I knew that you're working on this sort of protocol, which could prevent hacks and especially after hacks happen, could allow customers and users to secure their funds and block transactions, which we couldn't do in my previous company after the hack. And I thought that this will be very, very useful. And it turned out that it was very useful. So thank you very much for that. So can you tell about how Lossless protocol works, how many projects you have, and overall, what is the future of it?
Yeah, definitely. So Lossless protocol is a decentralized way of reverting crypto hacks. Basically, we have a protocol that is based on smart contracts that integrates into your ERC20 token. And then there's a way in a decentralized fashion to blacklist addresses and retrieve the stolen funds from those addresses. by using some like staking mechanisms, so some decentralized decision making, using multiple parties, and so it's a quite complex protocol to explain shortly, but that's kind of gives the idea, I guess. So yeah, what happened with the Horizon bridge is that a lot of tokens were hacked and stolen, and only you guys had our tech, so only you guys managed to retrieve those tokens. So it's sort of crazy that these, even after we have these crazy stories, projects are still crazy stories of success. Projects are still hesitant to integrate us, just because they're afraid of some gas fees, or maybe they are afraid of, I don't know, just not using the standard ERC20 code. Our long-term goal is to make it as a standard in crypto, so that everyone is using the LERC20 token. That's how our standard is called. It's L for lossless ERC20 standard, so that reversible tokens become like the mainstream thing. And there's actually already some signs of that happening. Almost a year ago, there was this Stanford paper that introduced new way of working with reversible tokens, and we had a call after that with Stanford people, talking about how this could evolve. Just recently, just this week, there was a new paper by Circle from that also are maintainers of USDC token, that also mentioned lossless protocol in their paper. So it looks like this is already happening, and our, like, I think our protocol is pretty great as it is. We just need more and more adoption. At the moment, we have over 40 projects that have integrated. And one of the things I was afraid of is, when starting this project, was that I thought that we need a really, really big count of the projects in order for at least one of them to be hacked, so that we can prove the tech works. I think at today there was almost 6 or 5 projects that got hacked, and we managed to retrieve funds for them. So I think the technology has perfect track record and being able to do and serve its purpose. And now it's just about the adoption and spreading the seed of security and making people aware that these things already exist. They can use it, and they can just be more secure and make their community more secure.
Yeah, you guys are doing a great work, honestly. I remember that day. I think it was even a Saturday or Sunday, because I think most of the hacks are happening at uncomfortable time for the companies who maintain. That's very usual. I already survived through two hacks. So when I was working in Limpo and when I worked right now, both of them happened on Saturday, and then we needed to spend nights and days to try to. In Limpo, we needed to track and inform all the exchanges that it was hacked, and we should block all the transactions and report addresses. This time it was much easier. We reached out to you. I think you were on holidays as well, if I'm not mistaken. But you reacted very fast. So we reverted some transactions, prevented selling. We needed a couple of parties to approve blocking, but eventually we managed a situation very well. In the future, do you plan to have more entities to be able to to basically decentralize blocking and management much more? And how do you have any plans to expand the circle, and how you're planning to do it?
Yeah. It's a good question. We actually, a few months ago, we released the ability to wrap the tokens in lossless tech, meaning that if you have some regular token like USDT, you can wrap it and get lossless USDT. And what it does, it allows you to select what sort of how decentralized you want this to be. So for example, if a project has a token, they already launched it, they cannot change the code because maybe it's not upgradable, but now they want lossless protection on that token. They can wrap that token, create an official version of that wrap token, and then when creating it, they can select what sort of members they want to have in their decision-making body, which makes the final decision, which sort of either validates or disapproves the hack. So now what they can do on Lossless, they can actually use Lossless DAO as one of the voting parties, meaning they don't even need to rely on us as a company. They can rely on Lossless token holders as a community, which immediately makes it way more decentralized. So that's the first thing. But also they can plug in something like Claros. So Claros, decentralized sort of judging protocol, where they have these juries which consist of members, and it's a pretty nice project. If you haven't heard about it, I can totally recommend digging into it, because it was at some point it was even recommended by Vitalik, as being a very innovative solution to these decentralized decision making problem. So you can plug there and it would also work. And then in the end, you can plug any address really. So you can even plug some sort of your own decision protocol and make decisions in that way. So that's our long-term goal, to make it as flexible as possible, meaning that as a token, as a project that owns a token, you can really make it so that it matches your own needs for decentralization. You can make it really centralized, maybe just admin accounts and lossless team.
Yeah.
And that makes it rather fast, to make decisions. But maybe you are not okay with that. So then you can plug some other ways to do the decision making. And it really is up to you. And our long-term goal is to become some sort of platform, a protocol really, and which is not owned by us, not controlled by us, but is just like a sort of a framework for using these reversible tokens and these mechanisms that I've talked about.
Have you thought about working with Open Zeppelin team directly? Because a lot of these things, in my personal opinion, a lot of these things you are working, they can be open sourced and also designed as a base layer of the security for tokens. So have you stayed in contact with them? What's the status there?
Yeah, we talked about with them a few times. We still have a pretty hot connection with them. So far, they're not super interested in this, just because I guess our protocol is still, profit generating, meaning we do take some success fees. There's also very strong incentive for the lossless token holders, built in, because that gives our token utility. And I think that's what they don't like about it. But as I said, if we are making this a framework which is decentralized and, can be a plug and play mechanism, after we do implement that, can sort of change their opinion, I guess. But we were also talking with people from Stanford, because they were working on the ERC standard that was supposed to define how reversible tokens should work. So we are also still in communications with them, just about how things could work out if we want to make this a standard.
Right. Okay. So I think we've talked about quite a lot of things. I skipped some of things from schedule just not to extend our conversation for too long. I will want to continue those private conversations with you, which I hope to have very, very soon. Maybe you have some final words about everything we talked about.
Yeah. I want people to always stay paranoid, but second, I also want them to always stay positive, just because we talked about a lot of problems, but in the end, all of them have solutions. Some of these solutions are already implemented. Others will be implemented in the near term. And in the end, we all going to be, secured in one way or another. We are still very early. So we have to stay paranoid, but we have to be positive about the future. I guess that's my take. That's the takeaway I want the people to get from this conversation.
Thank you. Okay, Domantas, I will let you go. Thank you very much for your time. And it was really great talking to you. I think we generated a lot of valuable content for the listeners. All the best wishes for the Lossless. I'm a big fan of the project, and I hope the future will bring the best for you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a very lovely conversation.